Hello, Mason Storm here. On today's episode, we're going to be making some hard candy. A very simple and very easy recipe to make, but you gotta have a decent thermometer, or things can go wrong. To make this recipe, I'm going to be using 3/4 cups of light corn syrup, 1 cup of water, and 2 cups of sugar. To make the releasing action easier, I'm going to dust a sheet pan with some confectionery sugar. That'll allow the hard candy to separate easier. To begin the process, we'll get ourselves a saucepan on the stove, go to medium-high heat, and then we'll get our thermometer into the bowl, which this is just a standard candy thermometer. And once we have that in place, then we can add in our ingredients, just dump them all in, and the waiting game begins. I just have a wooden spoon here to stir. Now, the candy thermometer that I have, it was really difficult to see in person, so I decided to add a thermal probe to the mixture as well, just so I'd have an easier time seeing it. And from what I can see from my preview of the video here, it's actually a lot easier to see on the camera than it was in person. But I think that digital thermometers are probably more accurate than candy thermometers, and they would work better for this application. Especially considering that thermometers nowadays are alcohol based, and boiling them for prolonged periods of time will reduce their accuracy due to the evaporation of the alcoholic content in the thermometer itself. So fundamentally they can't really get that accurate. But as you can see here, my digital thermometer has a nice good readout, and I've kind of wound the probe around the bottom of the candy thermometer so it holds it near the bottom of the pan. You don't really want it on the very bottom, you want it up a little bit, because if it's sitting right on the bottom, then it reads the temperature of the pan, which we don't want. We want the temperature of the liquid. So that works out pretty good. So we are going to heat this up until we get near 300 degrees. It's going to take quite a while because we're going to run into the barrier where it needs to boil off the water till it can get hotter. So it's going to stick around the same temperature for quite a while before it starts to move again. And once the temperature starts moving again, you kind of got to watch it a lot more closely, because it doesn't take very long to go from the temperature of boiling water up to the temperature of our candy being ready, which is 300 degrees Fahrenheit. Another thing I should probably mention is that I didn't have any actual light corn syrup, so instead I used like Pancake Syrup, Aunt Jemima, and seemed to work out pretty good. Actually gave a lot of flavor to the end candy, so I didn't really need to add anything to it to add additional flavor. I was planning on adding some maple syrup, but decided not to. And now that we've got past that boiling point, the temperature is starting to really rise, so I'm just going to give it a couple stirs. We went over to 60, so now I'm going to stop stirring it and watch it very attentively. And the temperature is just slowly climbing up, so we're almost there. I've reduced the speed of video, so it's now normal real time instead of 10 times speed or whatever I had it back there. And it's gradually going to climb up from here. And once we get really close to 300 degrees, I'm going to pull it off, give it a quick stir, and then we're going to start pouring it into our sheet pan so it'll start to cool off. Here we go. I'll do our final stir now. Off the heat. And there we go. And now here we are over at our sheet pan. Time to begin the pouring process. Now I had the camera a little bit low here, and I think it kind of screwed up everything I did from here on out, but the way to do it is you kind of just pour it down into the center and let it kind of work its way out, whereas I tried to kind of disperse it and try to do all this fanciness. And the problem I ran with that is that when you loop back, then because when the sugar pours down, it actually pushes the sugar around, and I actually pushed some of the sugar up on top of the candy, which wasn't really the desired result. We just kind of want it in the middle, a big piece, and it's got to be on a level table, so then it just kind of works its way out. But it didn't really affect the taste or flavor or anything. It just made it more difficult to cut and not as beautiful. So there's always that, right? I should also mention that I have a cooler rack underneath the pan, so there's air underneath it and it's not just heating up the table and wrecking it, so it's cooling off a little bit quicker. And we're just going to let it cool off for about 10 minutes, because if you try to cut it before that, it will just kind of reconnect to itself. And so we let it cool off, and then you don't actually cut it, you score it. So now to begin our scoring process, so I have a pizza cutter here, and I'm just going to run lines in one direction, then I'm going to run lines 90 degrees, like the parallel, to make little tiny squares, as good as I can kind of get it to go. You might want to wear hot gloves while you're doing this, but it takes probably about 10 minutes for it to cool off enough that it will hold the score lines. And then the thing to do is to wait till it's actually completely cold before trying to snap it apart. Of course, I didn't have such patience, and I didn't wait quite long enough, so I tried to kind of pull it apart beforehand. Got to try a piece that way, but I ended up waiting till it was completely cool, till I broke every piece into smaller chunks. And I just used something to kind of pry from underneath and then lift it up in big pieces and then just snap it at the score lines, and then just putting it in a bowl, and all the confectionery sugar kind of keeps it from sticking to itself. And once we have it all kind of broken up into little pieces, then we'll put more confectionery sugar in with the candy and then kind of shake it around. That way it doesn't all lump up into a gelatinous mass of hard candy. I ended up being very impressed with the flavor that Aunt Jemima's syrup brought to this hard candy. And if you don't use Aunt Jemima or regular kind of pancake syrup, you can add other things to flavor your hard candy, or even have it plain. Sugar on its own generally tastes pretty good. So let me know in the comments below how you'd make your hard candy, and I look forward to reading about it. If you like my content and would like to see more of it, please like and subscribe. And until next time, stay awesome.